In 5 years from now, blockchain gaming is a thing. It looks like Web 2.5, but the games don't make money. In fact, they lose money. And they act as user acquisition machines for blockchains that are looking to get more wallet users.
The Collectors.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Collectours, where we're talking about NFTs and Web3 and their impact on art and culture. And today specifically gaming, which is something I'm personally passionate about. So today I went out and I scoured the world for the top Web3 gaming experts. It took me about 30 seconds to come up with the incredible Will Robinson, who's agreed to be on here today. So welcome to the show, Will. It's awesome to have you.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
For sure.
G'day, Will Robinson. If you don't mind, maybe just helping us kick off with maybe a little bit of a top line, quick background about yourself and how you got into space, and maybe just a sort of a overview of your journey.
Sure. Let's go backwards. So for the last 2 years, I've been at Alliance. We're a Web3 accelerator. My job there is a mentor, community manager, and also business relationships guy. But during that time, I've been able to cement myself as an expert on Web3 gaming. I've gotten to work with amazing people like the Steppen team, the Axie team, but also a whole bunch of people in the fully on-chain gaming space. And I'll want to talk a lot about that later. That opportunity to really dive deep into games came from crypto. Came from 3.5 years as a forensic crypto auditor. So before joining Alliance, I was doing a lot of dirty laundry smelling as a forensic crypto auditor. Looking at how things were looking in the back end. FTX would have never happened on my watch, I like to say. So do you have a board? Do you have pen tests? Do you have a blue team? Do you have risk assessments? What does your tech stack look like? Tell me about all the weaknesses your tech stack has. Which blockchains do you have? And then building up sort of analyses so that should an auditor say, hey, this company really does have this money and it had it at this time legally, a judge, like if it ever went to court, would believe like that we did the best job we could. Like only today people are saying that auditors don't have the access or intelligence to audit crypto companies, and like by and large that's right. We're just a small team at Grant Thornton that could do it for the whole world. Basically, we got to do great things like the Ethereum Foundation, exchanges from Malta to Canada, and Grant Thornton, our sister firm in the US, got to do Circle and Coinbase. So it's fascinating looking at how crypto is built in the back end. That made me quite technical. But before that, I did a PhD in video game design. It was an 8-year journey, which included a master's on how games tell stories, how particular the rules in games tell stories. That's always been my fascination. We call it like mechanism design and procedural rhetoric. Or think of it this way. If paintings communicate through colors and poems communicate through words, can games communicate through rules? That was the focus.
Good news. We have an entire question about this that we'll ask you in like 10 minutes.
Fantastic. And
you will have no shortage of opportunities. And it's something I've written about as well, specifically mechanism. It's certainly nowhere near the extent to which you've studied and written about it, but like I love it and I love that positioning.
Great. Yeah. I mean, and the reason I got into that was it's mostly because of my mom. I think my mom told me at a young age I could do whatever I wanted as long as I was the best at it, which is a lot of pressure to put on a kid. And I was in the sciences. I was, pretty good at physics actually, and pretty good at organic chemistry, but I always had a friend or two that was just better. I was like, fuck, I'm not going to make it. Like, gotta pivot. So I took a film class on a lark because I really liked film. In particular, I had just watched this movie, Donnie Darko, which had this twist ending. And I had never really seen something other than a blockbuster, Die Hard style or Disney style movie. And it kind of like rocked me to my core. I was like, oh my God, there are cool movies out there. I'm just going to go down the list and watch them all, and took a film class to boot. aced the film class, was the best in the class. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make mom proud. Gonna go into cinema studies. I'm gonna take my like academic rigor and my work ethic from the sciences and just blow these people away. Went to McGill, did some film studies research there. It's mostly Marxist, feminist, critical readings of cinema, like the kind of humanities classic stuff you'd expect, which really freaks out crypto people, but we don't talk about that for now. And there, I realized that no, I wasn't the best at film studies either. There was this problem. People watched way more movies than I did. They were watching like 2 a day, and I was like, I can watch 3 a week at best. This is terrible. But I was still playing, video games a lot, more than them, and convinced my professors to let me study games in a film department. And that's what got me started down that path, and got to be the best there.
Yeah, I mean, one way to do it is just keep going more niche, man.
Yeah,
Eventually, you're
right?
the only. Not only are you the best in the world, you're the only one in the
That's
world.
exactly it.
I'd say blockchain gaming is about as niche as it gets, but that's a temporary state. We have a question later on talking about the mainstream appeal, about like how to cross that chasm. But I figured, let's start with the basics, man. We have to start at the beginning because I on my old podcast, one of my favorite guests that I had was coin artist Marguerite, and
Sure.
she came on, and I remember we talked about this, and she said, I'm paraphrasing here because she's so eloquent, but she said basically something to the effect of, it is so hard to build a good game. It is so hard to build an application on a blockchain. It is impossible to build a good game on a blockchain. And I'm not sure she was wrong. I just know that it's a funny thing for somebody to say when they commit their life to building games on the blockchain, which she has. So before we can even figure out if this is possible, we should probably start with some definitions, just basic ones. Like,
Sure.
I want your take on this. What is blockchain or Web3 gaming, and how would that even be different from what we would conceptualize as like traditional gaming?
Well, let's just start with what's a game, right?
Oh,
'Cause
good, even better.
we're going to need to go kind of deep on that. So there's a classic definition by Bernard Suits from the 70s, coming off of Wittgenstein, who's like, games are undefinable. He's like, fuck that. I can definitely define games for you. Uh, and he takes a whole like 300-page diatribe to explain what a game is. But it boils down to there's some goal that people are trying to get to. There's some obstacles towards reaching that goal. And there are people who want to overcome those obstacles to reach that goal.
Yeah, I've
That's
also
key.
heard immersion. I've also heard that like it needs to be voluntary, like these other like little facets. But I think you're absolutely right talking about at least the obstacles and the overcoming towards a goal.
You have to want to overcome obstacles to reach a goal. So, like, if you're playing soccer for just the money, it's not a game for you, according to Bernard Suits. And if you're washing the dishes because you love to wash the dishes, like you literally got them dirty just so you could wash them, then that's a game for you. So, really, the state of mind is a key piece. And an easy way to think about it is like, would you cheat to win? If you would cheat to win, then you're probably not playing a game, because the fun is in overcoming the obstacles. And so, how do we find then games move into crypto and to blockchain? Well, we sort of divide things in Web 2.5 and Web 3, in the on-chain gaming space. Web 2.5, I think, is the easiest to understand, which is that we take normal games, and instead of having a database keep track of everybody's assets, like your armor, your gold, your land, your companions, we put those things on chain. We just keep the ledger public. It's not totally novel to make things public. Like in Dota, all your actions and stats and chat record are public. There's APIs for all of that.
Right.
All your items can be traded already on the Steam marketplace. But the difference is it's permissionless. So this stuff is available to everyone once it's on chain. It becomes interoperable and composable. These assets can flow into different DeFi and NFT like smart contracts. And so you get to inherit a lot of the benefits of blockchain when you do that. But there's one big problem, which is we call the oracle problem, which is the barrier between reality and the blockchain is too, it has to be trusted. So when you get that sword, a centralized server has to tell the blockchain, hey, print a sword. And that centralized server could print as many swords as it wanted for as many people as it wanted. It might even be able to delete swords depending on how the contract's built. And so there isn't a trustlessness there. There's a need to believe that the game developers will not rug you. And that's what makes it Web 2.5. When we want to go to Web 3 games, well, all of a sudden, the entire state of the game needs to be trustless. And the sort of naive way or banal way of doing that is put the whole game on chain. So not the front end, not the client, not where your mouse pointer is, but every action you make that changes the state of the game has to be recorded to the blockchain. So nobody gets to cheat. Every time you kill the dragon, that had to happen permissionlessly, trustlessly, on chain, and then the loot was randomly generated on chain and it went into your wallet. And at no point did some trusted central server do something. And the huge problem there is that we don't have the scalability needed to do anything that looks like a normal game in that way. And I've written a lot about this, but think of it this way. Let's say we're very generous. We're playing some kind of chess game on chain where you want to move every 30 seconds, right? And your opponent wants to move every 30 seconds, right? So your game takes, very few moves. Maybe if we're 100 players, let's say we're 30 players, that's one move a second, right? So one move a second for 30 players, a blockchain can handle maybe 10 moves per second. Means we crap out the entire blockchain at very few number of players. Like we need 100,000 concurrent players for a successful game. And there's just no way a blockchain can handle it. So when Marguerite says it's impossible, she's not lying. There are some technological fudges that can be done though, and we can go into them to try and get us closer when you want, whenever you want.
Sure. Let's stay like at that high, because you took us back so far. Like, let's define a game that I think we have to stay at a high level for a second. I know MC, you wanted to talk about what Will was starting to hint at the top of the episode.
Yeah, so maybe this even goes back to the theory of games. So, and I was introduced to this many years ago as I got into crypto, and I think there's a lot of layers to it. But perhaps we can define actually what is mechanism design, which I think is key to game design, right? And how that may play a role in gaming traditionally, and where it might fit even more so in blockchain gaming.
Sure. So mechanism design comes from the world of economics and game theory. A good example of a mechanism is like an auction, which is meant to produce certain kinds of behaviors and outcomes, right? Like here's a great example of a cool mechanism, the Vickery auction. It's the second price auction, right? It's used today for like Google ad spend, and a version of it is used on eBay. Essentially, the idea is everybody bids, and the highest bidder wins, but pays what the second highest bidder bid, right? And it turns out that if you build a mechanism like this, then it doesn't matter whether other people can see your bid ahead of time or what's private or not. The game theoretically optimal bid for you to make is always your utility. So if you're buying something that's worth $100 to you, you always bid $100, no matter what outcome. Whatever happens, like that's the correct move. And has a really cool ways of reasoning about it. So while economists and blockchain people look at mechanisms to incentivize behaviors that produce utility, game people design similar kinds of structures to produce emotion or narrative or interest or puzzles to sort of sort through. And that's a lot of where my interest used to be when I was full-time game designing. I always go to this like favorite example I have. So the MoMA picked a dozen or so games to include in its design category for like the games that are the best designed ever. And it had classics like Pong and Tetris, right? But it also had this game called Passage by Jason Rohrer, and you can download it for like $1 on the App Store. In this game, you get a point every time you walk to the right. But if you find a partner, you get 2 points every time you walk to the right. It's sort of like exploring the world is more valuable when you're with a wife. But when you go down along the y-axis, instead of exploring to the right, you can find treasure chests. And the treasure chests get more plentiful the further down the y-axis you go. But so do the walls and the blockers. And while when you're alone, you can easily navigate the labyrinth to get all the treasure chests, once you get a spouse, your sprite is double wide. You now are 2 people moving down. And some of those treasure chests are no longer accessible. And there's this trade-off. So exploring is more valuable, but treasure chests are harder to get. And this is this tension that the artist comes up with, and to explain in a very metaphoric, rules-based way that finding love, while it gives you certain kinds of happiness, prevents you from finding others. And if you play the game 2 ways, optimally, hundreds of times the way I've done, you'll see that both outcomes lead to about the same number of points. That is, until you crack the code that's hidden in the chests, and then you realize that the artist is really like revealing that he regrets getting married. That once you understand how life works, you can get way more out of it if you go it alone. And this is this sort of hidden, mechanistic, game theoretical design that's leveraged for art instead of for optimal outcomes.
Kind of where
That's
philosophy meets psychology.
Yeah, it's like philosophy, psychology, economics. Here, the idea is we're incentivizing people with rewards, and those rewards are getting mapped onto ideology. And
Right.
so another
But
classic is like SimCity. Like
Oh,
SimCity
sure.
has a whole bunch of views of the world, how a city ought to be built. And all these views are based off of one book from 1983 that no urban planner recommends anymore, right? And in fact, the cities that SimCity would have you build are totally garbage cities that have no like mixed use zoning and have way too many roads and like are basically like car apologists.
Yeah, but at least you spend most of SimCity defending against alien attacks and not attending like community council meetings. Like thankfully it diverges from reality in a number of ways. It's escapism, I guess. It was only bad if you assume SimCity is actually a simulator of a city.
Right, but the thing is, SimCity inspired so many urban planners, right? Urban planning was a dead discipline until SimCity,
no.
and then they come into urban planning with these views on how a city ought to be built from a simulation they assume is like reasonable. So anyway, they have to be deprogrammed.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, also what you're describing makes me think of games like Papers, Please, where it's like just because you're scoring points doesn't mean you're doing the thing that you actually should be optimizing for. It's up to the designer to tell you what they think scoring points looks like. But a lot of the time that the points don't leave the game. Like the portability outside of the game isn't the point. The point is to have a contained experience, because within that you get to question for yourself whether the thing that you were optimizing for was the right optimization function. The player can question the designer. You can, people speed run games instead of going for high scores, and time basis is a totally valid way to play a game. It's valid. I wouldn't do it, but it's valid for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Brenda Brathwaite, this game designer, was famous for doing that with their game called Train, where your goal is to compete against other people to move as many people across the country as possible by train. Only when you finally deliver your first shipment of people do you realize you've delivered them to Auschwitz, and you have to rethink what you've been doing and how you're playing with the cards. And do you keep trying to score points, or do you start to sabotage train cars and have people escape and like fail at your job? And how do you, and the idea is we're German soldiers just like playing a game, right? Was this like the Hannah Arendt style critique? Anyway.
Right. No, I mean, look, these games are an unbelievable place to explore. That framework that you're talking about with mechanism, the way I learned it was that mechanics create dynamics, dynamics create aesthetics, and it's that emotional experience for the end player. It doesn't result directly from here are the rules. There's the dynamics, and what you're what you're describing is like that act of discovery of all of these little nuances. The choice to play with a partner instead of alone is a dynamic that emerges, and then it creates that aesthetic experience. But because there's that
100%.
one layer of separation, you get these really fascinating emotional experiences as the player that are completely potentially unintended by the designer.
And that's why it's so hard to do, right? Because you're playing with third order consequences when you're trying to design for aesthetics based on mechanism design. And in economics, like reverse mechanism design, the goal of having an outcome and trying to figure out what the mechanism beforehand that creates it is considered basically impossible. It's similar to like finding the pre-image of a hash. Like you just have to try a large breadth of mechanisms and hope to get lucky, or go through like a set of known mechanisms and see if any of them produce your result. And if they don't, well, there is no mechanism to reproduce that outcome. GG.
GG. So that takes me to my next question then, because you defined games earlier in a really great way. But one of the things that you kind of said was like, if you're just in it for the money, is it even really a game? And I wanted to ask you about play to earn.
Sure.
Like this is like, to me, play to earn, I don't want to insert too much personal bias into this, right? But I hear it all the time. And it's like play to earn. And suddenly this is like some sort of crazy new model that's revolutionizing not only gaming, but work. And everyone, the future is everybody playing to earn and everybody farming gold from wherever, Decentraland or in whatever Blizzard campaign gets launched next, right? It's, to me, is that still a game? Like, first of all, is play to earn the way that we're thinking about it? Can that be a game, or is it really more of a Ponzi? And if there's something to it, if there's really something to that model, what is it? What about that model might be innovative and sustainable in a way that really could revolutionize the player experience or benefit the player in a way that they're not currently benefiting?
Sure. So there are two kinds of play to earn. Play to earn's always existed, right? It predates blockchain and gaming in video games by a lot. There are two kinds of play to earn. There's zero sum play to earn. This is like a poker tournament organized by you and your friends, right? So one of you is going to walk away with the pot. It's going to make money, and no one really has a problem with this. This is just a way to incentivize, the excitement, and people still think it's a game when they do it. Some pros, when they play professionally in poker, have it stop feeling like a game, right? They're grinding. They're 5 hours a day, every day. They hate poker. They want to quit, but it's making too much money. No one can pay them as much as they're making. And so they keep playing. And there's probably a spectrum in between, right? Where it's still a little bit of a game and it's still a little bit of fun, but ultimately you'd rather cheat if you could. And so it'd rather not be a game. Then there are positive sum play to earn games where there's some external value being created. A good example would be like professional basketball. So the professional basketball players make money by creating value through entertainment and through advertising, right? So they create TV shows, they wear jerseys, we place ads on both of these things. And as a result, people make money. Like money comes into the system from the outside. And so although none of the basketball players are losing money, they're making money. So that's in normal world. Then in video game land, I think one of the most elegant play to earn models that exists is the Dota play to earn model. So there are professional Dota players who play in a tournament. To watch that tournament is free, but if you want to watch the tournament in client with a fantasy draft and replays and instantaneousness and lots of extra details and a better, feed on who's talking, well, you pay for a battle pass, right? And you add an extra, I don't know, $100 a year to the game, staying current with all the tournaments. And that $100, half goes to Valve and the other half goes to the pros. And so they're playing to earn in a very sustainable way because I want to watch them through this client. It's fantastic. When you play to earn, though, without creating any value, all of a sudden, there's a problem with the system. The mechanism is broken, right? So when we look at a game like with NFTs, and those NFTs breed more NFTs, and those NFTs create points that allow you to breed more NFTs, be it like CryptoKitties or Pegaxi or whatever you want, then the value that's being extracted has to come from either a greater pool concept where there is a reflexive economy and people are bad at understanding where it's going, and then it's going to collapse and they have to get out. And some might even see that as a game, like coming in and out of a reflexive economy. And just for the sake of the listener or whatever, the reason these games do that explosive growth, I think it starts with a very natural and normal, I want to play this game. And to play this game costs $1. And this dollar is to buy a pet, right? And if I play the game enough, my pet will make another pet that I could sell to someone else for $1, right? And that sounds cute and fun, and I can invite my friends. But if another person hears about this and wants to play, in addition to my friend, and is ready to pay $1.50, well, then I'm going to sell it for $1.50. And then they start playing and making pets, and I make pets, and they're worth $1.50. Maybe I'll make 3 a year. So my expected outcome is $4.50 a year, right? For my pet that costs $1. The market gets wise to this. It's like, wait a second, you spend $1 and you make $4.50. Well, I want one too, and I'll pay you $3 for it, right? Because that's a profit margin I'm open to taking. But if I'm going to pay you $3, that means everyone's going to pay you $3 for it, basically. And now instead of making $4.50, I make $9. $9, that's way better than $4.50, right? So I'm ready to pay $7. But now once I'm ready to pay $7, I'm making, oh my God, I'm making $21. And so as the price goes up, the price goes up. That's a problem, right? That's a positive loop that you want to quickly realize from the outside and not touch, because that's very volatile. Because as soon as one person doesn't want to buy it, then instead of giving you $500 a unit, it's giving you $495, and now fewer people are interested in this like exchange, and so they sell and get out of it. Now it's $450, then it's $400, then it's $300, then it's $200, it's back to $1, right? The value is totally dependent on the growth of users and the growth of the NFT being minted. And so this happened a lot with Play to Earn, right? This, what people call Ponzi or pyramid scheme. I mean, I think that's too malicious and gives too much like credit to the designers. I think that this is just like an artifact of what this kind of design results in. And people didn't complain when it created a lot of user acquisition, but it did cause a lot of harm. And so I think people need to be careful if they can now and learn from the lessons that happen. So no value creation there. It looked like there was value creation, but it was just a reflexive economic design.
Easy to confuse it.
So I mean, and we did sort of come out of that, I suppose, in the last bull, right? Axie was up there, struggling to come up with some other ones, but this sort of, and obviously NFTs, but then there was this NFT and the gaming, and I suppose now we're on the other side of that, where people are trying to come up with a better mousetrap. Given that context, and now, you know, with a Bair, I think everybody's trying to sort of workshop that. What do you think, given where we are, what on-chain game would have maybe the most sort of potential going maybe for the next bull cycle that potentially even could pop into mainstream in some way, shape, or form?
So we've got a lot of venture dollars, billions of venture dollars pumped into Web 2.5 gaming in the last cycle. One of the tricky parts about game design that people don't think much about is that they have a 3 to 5 year production cycle. They're really cumbersome and big to make. There's a lot of assets, a lot of organization, and also you want to keep quiet about the game for as long as possible because you have to manage hype very particularly. That's why NDAs in the game industry are so ridiculously powerful, because you really don't want to ruin your hype machine for when the game does launch. And I imagine that those games will have the best chance of winning. So they're going to be games made by established Web 2 game makers that are very lightly adding crypto to their games. They probably start with a lot of ideas around decentralized governance and are realizing that that is a can of worms you don't want to open for a really long time, especially when you have a product. I think that decentralized governance works on protocols, but it works very badly on products. And I suspect we're going to see things like assets like gold and dollars on chain, things like rare collectibles on chain. And if there's any kind of success, you're going to see a hybrid where the vast majority of items will not go on chain. There's just the chain can't handle the activity of Diablo. Like you couldn't drop every Diablo item on the chain; you'd break it. So you have to have only like the top 0.01% of items be on chain.
That's
Maybe
interesting.
well, and I was gonna say maybe just to follow, because you do hear like skins being sort of sold in black market, right? Which is quite difficult to be able to transfer that asset like that. That's not really set up for that. So I mean that seems to be the obvious application, but maybe there's some non-obvious applications that we haven't covered, or that you think maybe come from left field, or is that just basically how it's going to go? What's
So
obvious?
the Steam marketplace lets you buy items from any game. CS:GO skins, Dota skins. You can trade them for dollars. The fee they take is really small, and it's instantaneous. And because Steam is the go-to place for 90% of desktop gaming, you have it all there, right? A perfect interoperable marketplace. So I'm not too impressed by the opportunity presented by crypto. One thing that used to happen with the Steam marketplace, though, interesting piece of censorship, is it used to be used to gamble. So there are all these gambling websites, and it's hard to get your credit card and your bank account plugged into them because there's KYC. They don't want criminals money laundering. I don't blame them. But it turned out that the easiest on ramp for a couple of years was just CS:GO skins from the Steam API. And so all the major gambling websites would let you connect to a Steam store and let you buy Steam items. Like you just buy a whole bunch of guns, and then you would, when you placed a bet, like a $500 bet, this inventory of like 40 different guns would show up to like backpack fit what a $500 bet looks like. And for, yeah, a couple years, the Steam marketplace was doing like a couple $1 billion in volume just to for illicit gambling. They then cut off the API to these gambling sites and cracked down on this because they were basically facilitating something that wasn't meant to be facilitated. Crypto games, as a result, if they do truly provide permissionless, censorship resistant NFT assets, are going to run into this same problem, right? And so the question is going to be, is that regulatory arbitrage where they get the benefit, or are they taking on an incredible regulatory burden that they can barely police? And while they're trying to make a fun game, they also like have to run into this brutal, like way worse than the SEC regulators, right?
Yeah, I don't envy anybody who's going to be taking that directly on, but I think a lot of people maybe unwillingly or unwittingly already are. Some of us just really like games, man. Like just let us have that. But that leads us actually into another area that I'm really interested in personally, because you know, I have a big privacy background, and with Stashh as a platform, like we think a lot about user privacy, and we think a lot about the balance between Web 2.5 and Web 3. What needs to be on chain and what doesn't, if you're building a platform that revolves around social or marketplaces and discovery. To what extent do people who want to be in a community need elements of privacy in addition to publicity? To what extent do communities like need to have moderation in order to stay a community and not just something that always coalesces to the lowest common denominator? Like, these are tough questions, but I feel like, you know, when it comes to at least the question we started attacking earlier about like Web3 gaming, not Web 2.5, but specifically Web 3, we have examples of things like Darkforest that you and I have spoken about before. Maybe for people listening who have no idea what that is, like, how is Darkforest and games like it, how is that playing a part in blockchain gaming? And what does that have to do with privacy on chain and off?
So Darkforest is a 2-year-old fully on-chain crypto game where the entire state of the game was on XDAI, and which used to be called, which is now called Gnosis chain. And the game, it looks like a 4X space game. So you explore, you extract, you exterminate, you expand this sort of space empire. And it was this design pattern is taken from a game called Galcon. And if ever you want to play like the most fluid version of it, just download Galcon to see what we're talking about. It was played in bouts, like for like 5 days the game would be on and everybody would jump in, and you had to jump in early and play hard and fast to have any chance of winning. The game as a design object was a bunch of smart contracts and then a front end that was agnostic to those. The smart contracts were agnostic towards. So for instance, Georgios, the CTO at Paradigm, one of the finest investors in crypto, took a week off to basically build a headless client for Darkforest, so you could play the game in the command line. Like, it just didn't need a front end at all. It was slowing down computers to render all those planets and all that space. Might as well just tell the contracts directly what you want. Other people like Ansgar Dietrichs, one of the lead researchers at the Ethereum Foundation, rewrote the client to stop the asynchronous portions of it so he could make more moves than everyone else. And that was really powerful. And it showed that this kind of gaming would lend itself to nerds working overtime to beat other nerds. So like what we did, or what I did, was I realized I'm not a good enough engineer. I'm not an engineer to win. So I recruited a team. I got Omar Bosali, who is at Center Dev right now, building one of the fastest NFT indexers. I got some other really great people from Coinbase, and we created Darkforest DAO. And we built like an AWS backend to play the game faster and better. We had teenagers piloting 24/7, so we would get to sleep while we were programming and coming up with designs, and they could just pilot. And it became this crazy initiative where there were no rules. The rules were what was in the smart contract. Like, that was it. You could break the game any which way you wanted. And that opened people's minds up to what the future of on-chain gaming could be.
I mean, what's wonderful about it is exactly what you said. Like, the only rules are the contracts, and then anything else goes. Like, for a lot of really fun open world games, it's nice to have that kind of rules minimization, just so that like the open world concept can kind of emerge. But it does kind of show, especially when you have some of the smartest, most motivated people in the world now treating this as a game and dedicating weeks off of work where they could be investing in the next $1 billion protocol. They're just like, I really want to beat Will. And so they go and they just obsess and they rewrite the client. It's like, most people playing at home aren't like playing Fortnite and thinking to themselves, if only I could go, like, they'll mod the game, but they're not thinking like, if only I could just get into the Epic servers and rewrite things so I could just like, it's such a different level of engagement. It's still a game. It's very clearly still a game by your own definition. People are playing for fun. They're not in it for the money. They're immersed in this world, and they're competing. It's just played on such a different level. It's like 6-dimensional chess. And getting back to MC's question, right? Like, how are these on-chain games going to get mainstreamed, or is it just like an interesting sandbox?
So what they ended up becoming was kind of like an advanced capture the flag tournament for programmers, and became a great hunting ground for headhunters to poach engineering talent. And so while there may only have been 1,000 players, a lot of value was created in sourcing and discovering great engineers. And at that point, I thought maybe on-chain games are meant to do other things than attract 100,000 concurrent users because they can't support it. Maybe it's about power users. But at the same time, I feel like it has to be more. So there's a couple of bets you can make. One, everybody's going to get more technical over time. Like, as a population, we're teaching coding earlier to more people, and everyone will be sort of like content to add a little bit of JavaScript here or there. In Darkforest, there was a way to do plugins where you could basically add automations to your game pretty easily and quickly with a bit of simple JavaScript that even I could write. And I imagine that teenagers growing up now will be able to do this like normally and at scale in 10, 20 years. So maybe there's that piece. But also, fully on-chain games are going to lend themselves to AIs and other kind of bots playing them, right? It always reminds me of the Simpsons quote where Lisa's graduating in some sort of like future vision, and this general tells them that the wars of the future are not going to be fought on land or sea, but in space or perhaps a really tall mountain, and it will be fought by robots, and that their jobs are clear. It will be to build and maintain those robots, right? And that the future of on-chain gaming involves maintaining things that aren't human that play, right? You're going to be playing through a robot. Maybe you'll play as an organization, like the way like the army builds a robot to fight the navy every year, right? In some kind of like contest of battle bots. Like that might be what it looks like.
So it's about well, we hope at the end it's about humans after all, and well, we hope so anyway. You know, on that level, actually, on a human level, you know, recently read about on your Twitter about the passing of your father. So deepest condolences there, and maybe tying it back to how you got into space. How has he influenced your love of gaming?
Sure. Well, my dad was a avid gamer. He was a internationally competing bridge player, and taught me how to play bridge, but never played bridge with me because he said I wasn't good enough. He just didn't like playing with shitty bridge players. He was also a great golfer. That I got good enough to play with him, and once I started beating him at chess, he stopped playing chess with me. So, you know, he definitely gave me the gaming bug early on, and the sort of desire for intellectual stimulation, crosswords, jigsaw puzzles, whatever old people play. Um, my dad was 93, right? So he grew up at a different time when video games weren't a thing.
Did he give you not just a love of gaming, but a love of competition? Because it sounds like once he started beating him, it was over.
Yeah, I think he was very happy to be beaten at golf. I think he liked golf enough. But chess sucks as a game, man. I hate playing that game. And he got me to compete.
Ooh, hot take. That's our pull quote now. Chess sucks as a game.
Ugh, it's so bad. I mean, I played a lot of it growing up. Like I was tournamenting for like 4 years, and I just feel bad playing it all the time. Like so much anxiety. The whole like game is on me. I think chess gave me trauma. So like when I ended up playing StarCraft, it was always 4 versus 4 StarCraft. Like I got to like really high levels of 4 versus like top, 600 players in 4 versus 4, but like cannot play 1 versus 1 StarCraft. Makes me too anxious. Same thing with Dota. That's why I love Dota 5v5. Yeah.
Well, this actually this leads me to it. You're bringing up things like AI, right? And we're talking about like why humans play games, and we're talking about how AI plays into this. Like I remember in my freshman year of college, 2005, dating myself slightly, in a space dominated by 23-year-olds. I remember writing my very, very first college paper, because it was my very first seminar in like cognitive neuroscience seminar. I wrote about AI in chess versus poker, and why they were completely different design spaces, and focusing on like no limit, not limit poker. And I remember like kind of finishing off and saying, chess is basically already solved or will be soon in '05. And then I was like, but no limit hold'em, like this could take a few decades. It's a completely different problem. The AI has to think a completely different way. It needs to think like a human. It needs to anticipate a human. It can either play exploitatively or GTO, game theoretic optimal, like all of these different things. And then just like, a decade later, it was already over for us there too. Like just completely underestimating the extent to which humans are just going to get lapped by sufficiently motivated and resourced, artificially intelligent agents. So thinking about all that, right? And like thinking about the risks here, like how do you feel then about the emergence of this? Like at a deeper level, is that something you were anticipating too, or did that kind of take you by surprise that this has advanced so quickly?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everybody's been shocked by the emergence of ChatGPT, and like even Microsoft stock going up a berserk amount lately with the announcement of Bing being the ChatGPT interface. I think with fully on-chain games, there's no workaround. AIs will dominate, right? It's sort of like how there are lots of people who watch professional football but never play football. You're just gonna, if there's gonna be enjoyment, it's not gonna be in playing, but in spectating. Uh, I just, or there'll be leagues amongst friends where people just don't use AIs and they don't play for keeps. But as soon as you put things on chain, it kind of means you want to play for keeps. That's the major benefit. There are a couple other benefits that might happen, like having a backend that can receive like arbitrary code pushes, then it won't get corrupted. Like game developers can't just like open their backend and let people mod the game, right? You need to have very like clear parameters on how things can be altered or interacted with. But once you use like the EVM, whatever VM you want in crypto as your design space to make games, a lot of interesting user-generated content and modding does become possible that isn't possible in Web 2. My kind of hope is that there will be a niche community of Web 3 gamers who will be able to very quickly experiment and design new game phenomena with each other and own the game IP they build through a record on chain of like what people have contributed and sort of like DAO token manage their production. And then when they do find a really good game design pattern, build it in Web 2. Like you don't want to build your game in Web 3. This is similar to like Dota, made in the Warcraft 3 editor, right? This was an RTS game, but it came with a map editor. Someone built Dota there based on Age of Strife, which is from StarCraft, but wasn't very good. And it used the heroes that were native to Warcraft 3 to make it enhanced. And all of a sudden, an entire genre where the billions took off from human modding culture, not from some top-down game studio thinking about things. Same with the tower defense. Same with Fortnite, right? And this entire genre of whatever Fortnite's genre is called, I forgot. Battle Royale. Yeah, so that I think is my best hope.
Yeah, there sounds like an ideological tie-in. As you were talking, I feel like we're kind of sort of threading through so many sort of it's started. I'm getting meta as you're talking. I'm just starting to go down this rabbit hole. In the ideological thing may in some way supersede sort of the AIs, where if people are deciding to play with each other on some particular game, it's because there's a common value system with that, with that end in mind, whether they're playing against each other or with each other, depending on that objective. And with that, because I did a little digging on you, and you seem to have a sort of philosophical bent or background. I guess it was sort of humanist approach to your sort of I guess it's just your thinking and how you're applying that. How do you leverage that, or how do you see that tying into gaming, or does it tie into gaming at all? Maybe it's just sort of beneath the fold.
So a big piece of the research I did, in addition to mechanism design, was on user-generated content and how game companies had discovered methods to leverage player labor. And we even had a term for it called playbur. And the idea is modders add value to games, right? Just think about it, right? I create new textures, new lighting passes, I create new content. All of a sudden, players want the game more, and the people stick around in the game more, and the value goes up. And those players don't get paid, right? A good example we did was Little Big Planet. 28 designed levels by the core team, 10 million published levels by the player base. And as a result, people get way more out of this product. And those 10 million levels, although they create a lot of value, did not create a lot of earnings, right, for the people who made them. And so this play to earn straps on kind of nicely there if what the players are doing is laboring, right? If they're building the game up. And I think a lot of people in crypto are looking at that use case and hoping there's something there that you could somehow reduce the barriers to paying people. Right. And this is a Marxist bent, right? Like when people labor and don't get paid, that's bad, right? We if you create value and you are laboring and some capitalist is making the money, this is exploitation. We want to get rid of it. And so crypto, right, can be this tool we use to reduce the friction of paying for labor in a decentralized way. And I think with the fully on-chain game stuff, you have this opportunity now for people to have tokenized ownership of the things they're making, and maybe reap the rewards of those things when they move into like a profitability space.
They can also reap the reward of dealing with regulators.
Yes,
Like
so badly.
the greatest prize of all. But it's a
Mhm.
point well taken, you know, and all of us, you know, we're not saying that gaming should feel like work, right? That's kind of the point. But it is still a labor if it's a labor of love. And
Yeah,
if you can be a stakeholder in an ecosystem like this and be building up that game ecosystem so that others can benefit from it, play to earn the way it's traditionally meant does feel zero sum, does feel extractive. You're winning something that should have gone to someone else. But these sort of open world and expansionary world models, they can still be play to earn. And maybe we just have to do a little housekeeping or clean up on these old terms to refurbish them and make them feel new and fun and empowering again. I don't think, you know, maybe saying like play to Marxism is very good either, but we'll find some kind of branding so people feel like they're, again, as they create value, experiencing and capturing that value, not because they don't want to pay it forward, but just because then they have something they could reapply and reinvest in the game universe as opposed to the game being fully extractive.
right. And we've tried this also, like in Web 2, the Steam Workshop was there to monetize for people's Skyrim mods, but it was such a clusterfuck of IP rights management because people were modding on top of other people's mods, and the payments were so small. It was like
Yep.
inviting your friends, or it's like having your friends help you move, and then instead of giving them pizza, you give them $5 bills. Like, that's
Yeah.
not right. That's not what people want. So the hope is that tokenized ownership of the game IP, although it does have a value in the market, is more meaningful because you're owning the sort of ecosystem that you're building, and that maybe
Yeah.
people won't be disgusted by it.
We could probably talk for hours past this about like, so what do people want as a reward? And there's all things wrapped up in that in terms of identity and reputation, portability of reputation, whether it is portable. Like if you're very good friends with your best friend, you can't really port that reputation to becoming best friends with some dude you've never met down the street. You have a social context for that earned reputation and player status. Like hours of this, but unfortunately, we have time for exactly one more question. We do these in hour slots. You'll probably have to get your own additional hour slot in the future on the Collectours, but you've given us very gracefully an hour of your time to go down the rabbit hole. You've thought about this deeply. You're a literal PhD in these things, and your depth of knowledge is incredible. So, with that
Thank
said,
you.
no one is better positioned to make a prediction. And you can put the usual not financial advice disclaimers over everything. We don't want you to pump any bags. All we're saying is you are always, especially in your role with Alliance, gazing into the future, projecting, predicting, advising. What do you think? And I'm going to have another caveat in a second. What do you think this landscape looks like 5 years from now? And try to answer in a way that you think the maximum number of people would disagree with, but you firmly believe that you're probably right. Like, I don't want the easy answer. Give me your most contentious answer that you think is also probably correct. And I'm only asking you this because you're an expert and I know I'm going to get something good. Take a second to think about it. I'm vamping for you. But
I'm
as
good.
soon as you think you got it, let's hear it. I'm all ears. I'm taking notes.
In 5 years from now, blockchain gaming is a thing. It looks like Web 2.5, but the games don't make money. In fact, they lose money. And they act as user acquisition machines for blockchains that are looking to get more wallet users. Because the TVL of a wallet user can be in the TLV, total lifetime value, is like potentially in the thousands. And so I'm ready to buy you a $300 gaming experience. Like if you're going to become a $1,000 neobank customer of mine. And so games become marketing campaigns for neobanks. That's what the future in 5 years looks like.
So basically, it's just the top of the funnel.
Yeah. And like the experience is worse. There's nothing new or better that on-chain gaming makes, but the advertising and the quality of the games is such that they can overcome how much worse it is to put the game on chain. And as soon as you have a wallet, like, and you understand custody of private keys, the whole world changes for you as a user. And if you're on Avalanche or on Secret or on, Ethereum, that becomes potentially your home base, and your game becomes the front end to DeFi. And so no one actually knows what the back end looks like. They don't really care what chain it's on. And so that's why it's so critical that games get adopted by blockchains, and that blockchains have a game strategy for that user acquisition. It's why you see companies like Polygon just killing it, in my opinion, with Polygon Studios, having just incredible depth of game content coming out, because all those users are going to be, born Polygon Web3. I think this is similar to how Facebook became the internet for a large part of the global South. Like, it wasn't Google, right? It was Facebook that became your portal to the internet, and these games will become your portal to lending, borrowing, swapping, speculating. Yeah.
Makes 100% sense. That's a lot for me to chew on. Yeah, that's good.
Chew. We're going to be chewing and thinking about all this stuff for a while. It's a very sort of like L1 centric view of the world as opposed to a user centric view of the world. But it does turn out that, true of today, L1s are the ones holding the purse strings for a lot of these things. And we do rely on having blockchains be the center of this infrastructure.
So it's possible the L2 will buy the games. It's also possible the wallet will buy the game, because it depends where. If you believe in the fat wallet thesis, then the wallets pay for the games. If you believe in the fat L2 or fat L1 thesis, they pay for the games.
I believe in the fat Stashh thesis. We'll discuss it another time, but it's amazing to have you on here, Will. I think everything that you're saying is just such a sharp observation. You're not coming at this from having a lot of sacred cows in this. You have a depth of experience with the Web 2 gaming, now Web 2.5, and of course, you're one of the top players of Web 3 gaming, which turns out to be an extremely narrow category, but a very rewarding category, which apparently leads to very high-profile CTO positions and fund positions all around the blockchain ecosystem. So if anybody listening is taking something from this, definitely start playing games like Darkforest if your dream is to have an extremely important position at one of the coolest firms in the world. It sounds like an amazing recruiting tool. Otherwise, you may just be really interested in everything we just talked about, conceptually or emotionally. I mean, everybody's got a great connection with games to some degree, from playing, Go Fish growing up to dominating Dota now. So, Will, if people want to keep following you, hearing more of your thinking on gaming, or figuring out what Alliance is up to in the space, how can they follow you and keep in touch?
Sure. So I'm Danger Will Robin on Twitter. It's a joke from Lost in Space. And AllianceDAO on Twitter. We're always taking in applications on our website for founders who would like to join. We had 1,700 applications last cohort. And so we only take about 1.5%, but that means you'll get in, as you are an excellent founder listening to a great podcast.
Bam! How about that?
Great
talk about self-selection. If you're listening to the Collectours now, your ticket's already been punched.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck. Well, thank you, Will. Thanks for taking all the time. Thank you to everybody listening, tuning into another episode of the Collectours. We will be back with another episode very shortly with another big brain from around the blockchain Web3 NFT space. But for now, we're signing off. Thanks again to Will. MC, sign off for us. It was awesome to have this time today.
Thanks so much, Will. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to you next time.
Bye-bye.